Hi, my name is Dolores Frawa, and I am a Technical Assistant Specialist with the National Center on Tribal Early Childhood Development and a former Child Care and Development Fund Administrator for a tribe with a large allocation size. I am joined by my colleague Melody, and I'm going to pass it off to her to introduce herself.
Thank you, Dee. My name is Melody Redbird Post, and I'm the Director of the National Center on Tribal Early Childhood Development. And I'm also a former Child Care and Development Fund Administrator for a tribe with a medium allocation size. And I'll turn it back to Dee to begin our presentation.
Thank you. We will begin with session objectives. So during this session, we want to share an introduction to Child Care Development Fund Fiscal Management. For the remainder of the session, we will refer to the Child Care and Development Fund as CCDF. Our objectives for this sessions are to enhance participants' understanding of CCDF financial management definitions and practices, and increase participants' awareness of CCDF fiscal requirements and timelines. So let's get started. The CCDF final rule background. The Child Care and Development Block Grant, CCDBG Act of 2014, provided flexibility for tribal lead agencies in developing their CCDF program to fit the unique needs of their tribal community. The following final rule, published in 2016, balances the CCDF dual goals of promoting families' financial stability and fostering healthy child development, and while providing flexibility. The requirements in this final rule focus on 4 major provisions, which include protecting the health and safety of children, helping parents make informed decisions, enhancing the quality of childcare, and providing equal access to stable childcare. Tribal lead agencies define how they are meeting these requirements within their tribal CCDF plan. Applications for CCDF funds. To receive CCDF funds, tribal CCDF plans must be submitted and approved. Tribal CCDF plan serves as the tribe's application for CCDF funds by describing its childcare program and services that are available to eligible families. The plan provides information about the overall management of CCDF services, including information regarding income eligibility, provider payment rates, service priorities, parental rights and responsibilities, program integrity and accountability, and quality improvement activities. The tribal lead agency has considerable flexibility in administering and implementing child care services, determining the essential use of the funds, and identifying spending priorities based on unique and specific needs of children and families in the tribal community. Once the tribal CCDF plan is approved by your tribal leadership and the Office of Child Care, the activities and services described are considered allowable CCDF expenses.
Dee, I have a question. How often does the tribal CCDF plan get submitted to the Office of Child Care?
Great question. CCDF plans are submitted triennially, which means every 3 years. The current approved tribal CCDF plan expires on September 30th, 2022. Tribes who consolidate CCDF into an approved Public Law 102477 plan are also valid for 3 years, and approval is based on a rolling submission cycle. This is one of the flexibilities under Public Law 102477.
Thank you so much, Dee. Now let's talk about tribal child count. The Administration for Children and Families, or ACF, will calculate grant awards based on a self-certified child count declaration for the number of children under age 13, in other words, up through age 12, who reside on or near the reservation or service area. For more information on conducting a child count, please visit our website.
Melody, does the child count declaration need to be done annually?
Good question, Dee. No, actually, the self-certified child count declarations are submitted every 3 years. CCDF grantees submit their child count the same year as their triennial CCDF plans are due. All right, so we're going to move into the tiered approach to tribal lead agency requirements. ACF's Office of Child Care provides additional flexibility by taking a tiered approach to the CCDF requirements. Tribes are subject to different CCDF requirements depending on their CCDF allocations. There are 3 categories of tribal CCDF grants based on allocation size. Tribes with small allocation sizes receive grants under $250,000 a year. Tribes with medium allocation sizes receive grants between $250,000 and $1 million a year. Tribes with large allocation sizes receive grants over $1 million a year.
Great. Where can I find my allocation size? Is there a resource on the Office of Child Care website?
Yes, you can find the current CCDF funding allocations for states, territories, and tribes by visiting the Office of Child Care website. Click on the Data and Funding tab. There, you'll see the funding allocations for each grant year. The current tribal CCDF allocation sizes are based on the fiscal year 2016 CCDF allocations. The first annual allocation amount awarded determines a new grantee's allocation size. CCDF funds are subject to the availability of federal budget appropriations. Once appropriated, these funds are made available through the Office of Management and Budget. CCDF is comprised of two funding sources: discretionary funds and mandatory funds. Discretionary funds are provided under the CCDBG Act as amended. The discretionary funds will include a base amount of $30,000 plus a per-child amount for each tribe. Tribal consortia receive $30,000 per consortia member, or a prorated amount for a member with fewer than 50 children, plus the per-child amount. Mandatory funds are provided to eligible tribes and tribal organizations under Section 418 of the Social Security Act. Mandatory funds are calculated solely on a per-child basis and do not include a base amount. Although tribes receive CCDF funds from two different funding sources, both mandatory and discretionary funds can be expended for the same purposes, including direct services, administrative costs, non-direct services, quality activities, and construction and major renovation if approved.
Thank you. I have a question. What can the discretionary base amount be used for?
Good question. So the base amount provides an important source of funds that can be used for any costs that are consistent with the purposes and requirements of CCDF. For more details, check out the American Indian and Alaska Native Guide, Financial Management, Grants Administration, and Program Accountability, or the Fiscal Guide, on our website.
Thank you, Melody. Now let's take a look at the Notice of Award. For CCDF funding to be awarded, an approved plan will need to be in place. So how will you know if your plan is approved and how much money you have been awarded? Within this plan cycle, you'll receive a letter of approval from OCC once your plan is approved or approved with conditions. The funding amount, ACF's Office of Grants Management will send a notice of award letter to the tribal leader listed in your plan. The CCDF funds are available to grantees each year soon after October 1st, which is the beginning of the federal fiscal year. Sometimes funds are awarded under a continuing resolution by Congress. In that case, grantees will be funded a portion of their mandatory funds. Notice of award letters include the annual allocation of discretionary and mandatory funds. You may receive an updated notice of award letter over the course of the year if funding allotments change. So make sure you keep a copy of each award letter as they come in and always operate under the most current notice. So by accepting the notice of award, the tribal lead agency agrees to comply with the program's terms and conditions.
So Dee, where would I find the program terms and conditions?
That is a great question. The program's terms and conditions can be found on the website of ACF Office of Grants Management and on our National Center for Tribes and Early Childhood Development website in the CCDF Administrator's Resource Notebook. Moving along, the new standard notice of award format consists of 2 pages. The first, which shows you the following: recipient's information, such as the grantee's name and the federal statutory authority for the funds. The unique federal award identification number, each grantee will have their own unique number. The box in the middle contains a summary of your award. More detailed information is located on the second page of the Notice of Award Letter. On the second page, you will find the following: Common Accounting Number, or CAN, which identifies where the funds are located at the federal level, and the amount of the award detailed within that letter. So cumulative grant award for that fiscal year to date is a document number. The funding type, whether it is discretionary or mandatory. I just want to make note, tribal lead agencies operating under their CCF programs under approved Public Law 102477 consolidation plan receive their funding through the U.S. Department of Interior and therefore will not receive a notice of award letter from the Office of Grants Management.
So D, does the award letter identify the base amount?
The notice of award letter usually issued several times within a year, and the base amount is not indicated on that letter. So instead, this information is located in the allocation table. Okay, so let's take a look at the CCF expenditure requirements. All tribal lead agencies are required to spend their CCF funds according to the CCDF Act of 2014, the 2016 CCDF Final Rule, and their approved tribal CCDF plan. So CCDF funds should be used for direct services, administrative costs, non-direct services, and quality activity.
So what types of expenditures are considered administrative costs?
Well, no more than 15% of the aggregated CCDF funds expended from each fiscal year's allotment may be used for administrative costs. So for example of administrative activities include the following: planning, developing, designing the CCDF program, providing the public with information about the program, including the conduct of public hearings, and the preparing the application and the plan, and developing agreements with administering agencies, and also to carry out everyday program activities.
So can an indirect cost rate be charged to administrative costs?
Great question. Many federal programs permit tribes and tribal organizations to apply an indirect cost rate to account for administrative costs that can easily be charged to a specific program. So for example, accounting and personnel services. An indirect cost rate is arrived at through negotiation between a tribe or tribal organization and the appropriate federal agency. Indirect costs, as determined by indirect cost agreement, are allowable expenses for tribal lead agencies under CCDF and expended. It should be reported. Public Law 102477 grantees could charge 100% approved indirect cost rate to CCDF if the grantee chooses. However, regardless of a tribe's negotiated indirect cost rate, CCDF administrative costs cannot exceed that 15% administrative cost limit. So let's continue our discussion on expenditure requirements, starting with non-direct services. So non-direct services are not the same as indirect costs. Indirect costs are administrative costs. An expenditure of CCDF for funds for non-direct services needs to be tracked and reported. Non-direct services are childcare services provided that are not direct services to families and are not considered administrative costs.
So I'm a bit confused about non-direct expenditures. Can you provide me with some more examples?
Certainly, some examples of non-direct expenditures include establishing and operating a certificate program, eligibility determination and redetermination, the establishment and maintenance of computerized childcare information systems, preparations and participation in judicial hearing, childcare placement, as well as recruitment, licensing, inspection, reviews, and supervision of childcare placements, as well as rate settings and training of childcare staff. I sure hope that was helpful.
Thank you.
All right, so as we continue, tribal lead agencies with medium and large allocation sizes are required to spend a percentage of their discretionary funds on direct services. So after taking into account funds that are reserved for quality activities and administrative costs, tribes with medium and large allocation sizes must use no less than 70% of the remaining discretionary funds to fund direct services. Just want to make note that the base amount of any tribal grant is not subject to direct services requirement. So to calculate the minimum discretionary funds for direct services, which applies to tribes with medium and large allocation sizes, first start with discretionary per child amount and subtract any discretionary funds spent for administrative costs, if applicable. Then, from the total amount, subtract discretionary funds minimum for quality activities, 8%, and then subtract discretionary funds minimum for infant and toddler quality activities, which is 3%. That will give you the remaining discretionary funds. So multiply that amount by the minimum percentage of remaining discretionary funds that must be spent on direct services, and that will give you the total minimum discretionary funds to be spent on direct services. For a handout on this, see the 2019 Tribal Management Institute Concurrent Session 5, Ensuring Effective CCDF Financial Management System, Budgeting, and Internal Controls. The majority of CCDF shall be used to provide child care services directly to eligible children by eligible child care providers. For more information about eligible children and child care providers, please see the Subsidy Eligibility and Equal Access resource page on our website for more information. A link for these two resources will also be available on our landing page. All tribal lead agencies are required to spend a percentage of their total CCDF expenditures on quality improvement activities. Quality expenditures are cumulative over the 3-year liquidation period of each fiscal year's grant. The minimum spending requirements for quality activities apply to total expenditures, mandatory and discretionary fund, excluding the discretionary base amount. So rather than total funds allocated. So tribes must spend quality funds on at least one of the 10 allowable activities, and there is flexibility in each of these areas to improve the quality of child care provided.
So I have a question. Do my quality activities need to be tracked and documented for year-end financial reporting?
Yes, tribal lead agencies need to ensure that all expenditures for quality activities identified in the plan are tracked and documented regularly according to your tribal financial management system. So the actual percentage of CCDF funds that the tribal lead agencies spend on quality is determined by total quality expenditures at the end of the fiscal year in your financial reporting on the ACF 696T report.
Great. So now let's take a look at obligation and liquidation timeframes. In general, obligating funds is to commit CCDF funds to an expense. For example, obligations are created through the issuance of a voucher or certificate to a family, a purchase order for supplies or classroom materials, or a contract or subgrant to purchase services. Some obligation examples are as follows. The remaining amount of child care payments listed on an existing voucher or certificate issued to a parent for child care services, purchase orders to an educational supply company for new classroom shelving and toys, a contract with someone to complete minor renovations, a contract with a training provider to provide the child care workforce with training, or a conference registration submitted for child care workers. If you have been approved to use CCDF funds for construction and major renovation projects, those construction and major renovation funds awarded do not have obligation periods. Liquidations or expenditures are charges made to the project or program, which are the actual cash amounts dispersed for direct charges for goods and services. Liquidation would be the individual amounts for spending within each line item you find on your monthly expenditure reports. Basically, the checks were written and the funds were spent. If you have an approved construction and major renovation fund, you can have up to 3 years to liquidate those funds. For more information on obligation and liquidation, be sure to check out our Tribal CCDF Guide to Financial Management, Grants Administration, and Program Accountability available on our website.
Great, I have a question. What are the time frames for obligation and liquidation?
Tribal lead agencies have 2 years to obligate mandatory and discretionary funds, as well as an additional year to liquidate. For example, tribes have until September 30th, 2021 to obligate both mandatory and discretionary funds awarded in grant year 2020. Those funds must be liquidated by September 30th, 2022. Another example is the Coronavirus Aid, Relief, and Economic Security, or CARES Act funds, which will need to be obligated by September 30th, 2022, and liquidated by September 30th of 2023. So on the screen, you'll see a table with obligation and liquidation periods listed. In the first column, you'll see fiscal year 2018, fiscal year 2019, and grant year 2020 CCDF funds with the date by which the funding must be obligated and liquidated across the top. This table offers a reminder about the deadlines for grantees to obligate the funds and when to liquidate the funds. So the CCDF final rule clarifies that CCDF funds must be spent in a manner that is consistent with the CCDBG Act of 2014, the CCDF final rule, Section 418 of the Social Security Act, and applicable state, tribal, and local laws. It also specifies certain activities that are restricted and cannot be paid for using CCDF funds.
Great information, Melody. I have a question. I have a family that wants to send their school-age child to a private school. Can my tribal CCF program cover the tuition?
Thank you for that question. So for students enrolled in grades 1 through 12, CCDF funds may not be used for school tuition, any service provided during the regular school day, any service resulting in academic credit toward graduation, or instructional service that supplants or duplicates the academic program of any public or private school. For additional examples of restricted use of funds, please refer to our AIAN CCDF Guide, Financial Management, Grants Administration, and Program Accountability.
Next, we'll talk a little bit about construction and major renovation. Tribal lead agencies, including tribes operating under approved Public Law 102477 plan, who are considering using CCDF funds for construction or major renovation costs of child care facilities, must first request and receive approval from ACF before using our CCDF funds for construction or major renovation. OCC has published specific application procedures in an OCC program instruction on tribal construction or major renovation that provides details on applying for construction or major renovation funds, as well as reporting requirements, which can be found on the OCC website. It is important that a tribal lead agency involve their OCC regional office early in the process of considering the merits of construction or renovation and discuss with the regional office any proposed projects prior to submitting a written request and application. Construction refers to building a child care facility that does not currently exist. Major renovation involves a structural change to the foundation, the roof, the floor, exterior, or load-bearing walls of a facility, or the extension of a facility to increase its floor area. Major renovation also includes any extensive alteration of a facility, such as to significantly change its functions and purposes, even if such renovation does not include any structural change. So a tribal lead agency does not need to request an approval to spend CCDF funds on minor renovation. So minor renovation includes all renovation other than major renovation or construction as defined above. There are different obligation and liquidation requirements for funds and grant award for construction renovation. 3 years to liquidate with no separate obligation requirement. The liquidation timeframe for construction and renovation begins with the date that funds are originally awarded, not the date that funds are transferred to the separate grant award for construction and renovation. So, for example, funds awarded and then transferred to construction renovation in fiscal year 2019 must be liquidated by September 30th of 2021. So funds cannot be moved to construction or renovation after the year end of the fiscal year in which they were awarded.
So when can I apply for construction and major renovation?
Yes, an application for construction and major renovation can be submitted to OCC at any time during the year. But in order for OCC to ensure time For funds to be awarded for approved construction major renovation application, a partial application for construction and major renovation are due July 1st of each fiscal year. A completed application for construction major renovation submitted to OCC is necessary for the tribal lead agency to begin actual work on their construction project.
Thank you, Dee, for the information about construction and major renovation. Let's review other funding that may become available. OCC may have funding opportunities that may become available and may require an application. Reviewing program instructions, information memorandums, and guidance helps with determining eligibility and knowing what to expect during the acceptance of the grant. An example of other grants that have become available to tribal CCDF programs are supplemental disaster relief funds and the CARES Act funding. So having a comprehensive budget in place can be a key factor in successful program operations because a realistic budget acts as the roadmap that guides the program throughout the year. The connection between the budget and program activities requires an intentional effort between the program and fiscal departments to work collaboratively to ensure that program activities are carried out within the framework of available financial resources. Successfully putting a budget in motion requires that programs develop and follow processes for informing and educating staff on resource allocations and cost constraints, routinely reviewing spending and sharing budget issues and concerns with accounting staff, and engaging staff in budget monitoring and cost containment efforts. The CCDF final rule requires that the tribal lead agency and any subgrantees to keep on file cost allocation plans or indirect cost agreements that have been amended to include costs allocated to CCDF. Tribal lead agencies are not required to have these plans and agreements approved, but they are subject to review under the CCDF final rule. Costs can be allocated in one of three ways: as a direct cost, a proportionately allocated cost, or an indirect cost. Cost allocation for CCDF funds can also be conducted according to the tribal lead agency's overall financial management system. Effective and efficient financial management systems are an essential part of successful CCDF program operations. The CCDF program is part of the greater tribal fiscal system and must follow the tribe's fiscal policies. A financial management system is both a set of accounting records and the policies and procedures used to maintain those records accurately and in a timely fashion.
I have a question. What are some general financial principles for administering federally funded tribal programs?
Good question. Some of the general financial principles include the following. Contract and compliance requirements are fulfilled. Grant and contract funds are expended appropriately according to the intent of applicable statutes. Tribal laws and procedures are followed. Accounting records are maintained. Assets are safeguarded. Internal policies and procedures are developed and implemented to include a cost allocation plan. Internal control systems are adequate. Annual audit is conducted. Ensure a strong fiscal management system through frequent and effective communication between the CCDF administrator and the tribe's finance department. Strategies of communication could include monthly finance meetings where expense reports are reviewed, budget development meetings to ensure cost categories are identified before the beginning of the fiscal year, or consultation in the development of the tribal CCDF plan, and coordination in completing fiscal reports.
Thank you, Melody. Now I'm going to share with you about fiscal requirements. Fiscal requirements require that tribes have in place fiscal controls and accountability procedures that permit the tracing of funds to a level of expenditure that is adequate to establish that such funds have not been used in violation of the CCDF rules. Tribes shall expend and account for CCDF funds in accordance with their own laws and procedures for expending and accounting for their own funds as part of their overall financial management system. Contracts that entail the expenditures of CCDF funds shall comply with laws and procedures. Fiscal controls and accounting procedures shall be sufficient to permit preparation of reports required and tracing of funds to the level of expenditure that is adequate to establishing that funds have not been used in violation of the provisions of the final rule. So any expenditures not made in accordance with the CCDBG Act, the implementation regulations or the approved CCDF plan must be subject to disallowance. Tribal lead agencies shall describe in their CCDF plan the internal controls that are in place to ensure integrity and accountability and meet audit and reporting requirement. It is important that the fiscal department is provided with a copy of the approved CCDF plan and an additional copy anytime the plan is amended to assure compliance. Financial reporting. All tribal lead agencies are required to complete and submit the ACF 696T report on an annual basis. Tribal CCDF programs must submit financial reporting within 90 days after the end of the fiscal year. The ACF 696T report is submitted annually. So tribal CCDF programs may be responsible for submitting as many as 3 separate financial reports yearly. Annual financial reporting is required for all tribal lead agencies except those receiving CCDF funds through the Public Law 102477 Consolidated Plan. Financial reporting is completed via the ACF 696T, a financial report form for CCDF tribal lead agencies. Tribal lead agencies are required to use ACF 696T report expenditures for their mandatory discretionary construction and major renovation funds, supplemental disaster relief funds, and the CARES Act funds issued under CCDF. These reports must be signed by an official representative of the tribal lead agency, and the individuals who signs this report are certified that the information provided on all parts of the report and all accompanying documents are accurate and correct. So tribes who operate under the approved Public Law 102477 Consolidated Plan operate under a single plan with a single budget and a single reporting system. So as a result of this reporting consolidation, Public Law 102477 grantees are not required to submit the ACF 700 or the ACF 696T. They are instead required to submit the Consolidated Public Law 102477 report, which includes a narrative report, a financial report, and a statistical report. These are submitted to the U.S. Department of the Interior. For support with these reports, contact the Bureau of Indian Affairs representative for the tribe. You can also refer to the OCC program instruction for Public Law 102477 CCF grantees for more information.
I have a question. I currently have 3 fiscal year awards, FY 2018, FY 2019, and GY 2020. Will I be reporting on all 3 on December 29th?
Great question. Tribal lead agencies must submit separate annual reports for each fiscal year in which CCDF funds are awarded. Therefore, a tribe may be submitting as many as 3 separate ACF 696T reports this year, 1 for funds awarded in fiscal year 2018, 1 for funds awarded in fiscal year 2019, and 1 for funds awarded in GY 2020. The ACF 696T report will be submitted electronically within 90 days after the end of the federal fiscal year. Tribal lead agency with real property in which the federal government retains an interest, which means real property that has constructed or renovated in whole or in part with CCDF dollars, must prepare and submit a real property standard form, the SF 429, with an attachment A and other attachment as applicable. Tribal lead agencies are required to submit this report annually at the same time as their annual 696T financial report. Please join us because this concludes our on-demand session 3 on Introduction to Fiscal Management. This session is one of a 5-part fiscal series. Our other sessions include session 2, Justification of Child Care Development Fund Expenses, Session 3 is demonstration of budget template. Session 4 is demonstration of the projecting of CCDF spending for direct services tools. Session 5 is projection of the quality expenditures and budgeting demonstration. And you complete this series by visiting our website.
All right, so we've shared a lot of information with you during this session. The following resources are available to tribal lead agencies and tribal fiscal department staff for reference. You can get these links by visiting the resources section for this session, which includes the following: Office of Child Care website, where you can find the following resources: tribal funding allocation amounts, program instructions, information memoranda, reporting requirements, policy interpretation guidance, and guidance for navigating the COVID-19 pandemic. The American Indian and Alaska Native CCDF Guide to Financial Management, Grants Administration, and Program Accountability. Also, the Coronavirus Aid, Relief, and Economic Security, or CARES Act information, and sample quality activities from the AIAN CCDF Guide for New Administrators. Thank you so much for joining this session. If you would like to request technical assistance, please reach out to your Office of Child Care regional office, and your program specialist will be happy to assist you. If you are a Public Law 102477 grantee and you'd like to request technical assistance, please reach out to your Office of Child Care regional office and copy your BIA representative. Thank you so much for joining this session. We're so glad that you took the time to listen to this information. Feel free to reach out to us with any questions.